The story begins in a creepy place, surrounded by tall rocks known as the Demon King's Castle. The location is the final location of a battle. There, the Demon King was seen sitting on his throne accompanied by demon troops, who stood on each side as if waiting for someone's arrival. Shortly, from a distance, a man was seen walking towards the Demon King, and was greeted enthusiastically by him. The Demon King then ordered his troops to kill the man, and without further ado they immediately ran towards the man to attack him. Seeing all that, the man just smiled and released his power as a sign of preparing to fight. With power in both hands, the man walked towards them and soon darted forward quickly. Then from the portals on his right and left he took a handgun. With the handgun he released the power of aim compensation and strengthened penetration, then fired the power at the demon troops and managed to knock down some of them. When surrounded, the man jumped high into the air and fired a power called outburst acceleration at the demon troops. Because the number of demon troops was too large, the man finally couldn't help but release a power called bullet dance and attacked them very brutally. After slaughtering them all, his attention was distracted by the screams of the Demon King, who did not accept seeing the demon troops defeated so easily by a lowly human like him. The Demon King tried to attack the man but unfortunately missed. Then, from behind thick smoke, a handgun was right in front of his eyes. The man looked at the Demon King very sharply, and his gaze was returned by the Demon King by raising his weapon high to bring out the power he had. Then from his forehead appeared an eye-like shape in which there was a black stone. After that he swung his weapon at the man quickly. Fortunately, with very good reflexes, the man managed to avoid the attack. The attack that he managed to avoid made a huge explosion that destroyed part of the area there. Seeing the devastating effect of the attack, the man said that he was very grateful to be able to avoid the attack. But before he finished his words, the Demon King had attacked him again. Despite not being able to avoid the attack, the man managed to withstand the attack, causing his body to be pushed far back. Not only that, the Demon King continued to attack him blindly, making the man difficult because the Demon King's barrier managed to absorb his attacks. While busy avoiding the Demon King's attacks, the man tried to find a way to defeat him, until finally he realized that the black stone on the Demon King's forehead was his weak point, making him determined to do whatever it took to destroy the barrier and the black stone. The man finally tried to attack the Demon King, although his attack managed to hit the Demon King's body, but it turned out that his attack had no effect on him, so it made the Demon King laugh because he thought it was a futile action, and therefore he said he would show him the difference in strength that existed between the two of them. The Demon King then released his power, where from his hands came out several black ball-shaped energies around which there was a purplish aura. The Demon King then shot the black balls towards the man. Fortunately, he managed to avoid them, even though he had difficulty because the movement of the black balls was very fast. But when he thought he had managed to get through it all, suddenly a black ball shot forward towards him and managed to hit him right in the stomach, making the handgun in both hands fall off. Then the Demon King said, no matter how hard the man struggled, there was no way an attack from a boy like him would be able to reach him. Hearing the Demon King's words, the man could only laugh and said that he would prove the Demon King wrong. Not long after, a large yellowish portal appeared, and from inside the portal the man pulled a shotgun out of there and immediately fired it at the Demon King and managed to crack the barrier. The Demon King became angry and shouted at the man and said that he would die at his hands. He then released a black aura, where the black auras managed to grab the man's legs and pull him as if he was going to eat him. Not wanting his life to end just like that, he continued to shoot the Demon King's cracked barrier until he finally managed to destroy it, and the black aura that bound him was released. The Demon King was getting angry, and when he was caught off guard, the man quickly ran to take back his handgun and shot the black stone on the Demon King's forehead. The Demon King was defeated. Then he smiled, satisfied with the action he did. After his victory, a game-clear writing appeared which turned out to be all just a game, and the male character in there was the World Version 2.0's Magic Marksman. Then seen the hand of a man playing the game, where he was amazed because the game was very fun because he did not expect that using magic skills would be that good. Therefore, For this time, the character he will choose next in the updated world version 3.0 will be the Mage. But because it is likely that the ordinary Mage character will be boring, then he will make a special Mage through the world's karma system. It is a system where he will receive penalties in exchange for benefits. Then because of the risk it held, most people didn't use it. But with the nature of penalties like that, he could also get additional stats. And if he added all the magic related to the stat to the maximum stat he could get, then he could make the ultimate Mage, and it would be very interesting. But if he put too many penalties, then his character would be very sick, even though he thought that. The man finally didn't care because he thought it was just a game character. Then shortly, the sound of someone waking up a man named Lennox was heard. Then the man named Lennox was seen waking up, and he was confused because from his last memory, he was waiting for the loading screen before the game started. And when the loading screen ended, a black light overflowed, and he lost his consciousness in strong gravity, as if he was sucked in. Then after that, when he came to his senses, he was on the bed, and a man's hand tried to grab him. The man's hand gripped his shirt tightly as he scolded him for not waking up. The man then punched Lennox until his body hit the wall, and when he looked around, there were several men who had gathered to witness it all while looking at him with a pitiful look, where he had now become the weak character he created in the game. After he regained consciousness, the man who hit him continued to scold him, and then told him to go to the meeting room immediately. Lennox was still speechless, as he had no idea what was going on. Meanwhile, a group of men who witnessed the incident made fun of him as a stupid man because he was still asleep when the supervisor came. They also said that Lennox would sooner or later die from being beaten. While still talking about Lennox, they were startled by the supervisor's voice telling them to get out of there immediately. Then soon they all frantically ran out to the meeting room. Meanwhile, Lennox, who saw it all, looked still confused, and, in his mind, he thought that Lennox was a character he made just to enjoy the game. But he did not expect that he could be trapped in the body of a pathetic character that he made by himself. 3 days had passed since he woke up in that strange place, which looked like a factory. He still didn't know much about what was going on, but he was getting used to the factory's fast-paced daily activities, where he would wake up before sunrise and work until he was about to pass out from exhaustion. Also, before going to bed, he would get a bowl of porridge that looked like leftovers. Although he had tried to ask the workers something, they refused to talk to him. Partly it was because they were busy working under the boss's supervision, but the rest, it was all because they already looked at him as a dead man. Lennox thought their assumption was not wrong, because with a body this weak, he was not sure he would be able to last more than a few days in a place like this. In the midst of his thoughts, he was startled by the voice of his supervisor who shouted at him because he saw him sitting in pain while working. With a face full of sweat, Lennox coughed. Then the supervisor who saw it assumed he would die soon, so told a man named Van to take him to the corner of a place so that he could die there. Lennox, hearing his words, could only say to himself that in this extreme situation, the reason he could maintain his sanity must be because of the determination he poured into his character. As he was still sitting weakly, the supervisor kicked him and said not to get in their way and told him to go somewhere else to die. The supervisor left Lennox, who was still sitting. Then Lennox realized that even though he made his character have a weak body, his body had a magic talent. If he could bring out that ability, then surely he would be able to get out of that place. Lennox thought of trying to escape, but before that first he had to be familiar with the structure of the place. Lennox slowly headed towards a door very carefully while looking at the people around him. Fortunately, none of them noticed him. He then managed to pass through the door, and he saw a light emanating from an open door in front of him, which was probably the door leading out. As he approached the door, he accidentally saw 2 men talking. Overheard from their conversation, they were complaining about the workers working so slowly. Lennox was then surprised when he heard the 2 men mention someone he recognized as the Black Mage, where the Union took their shredder and sold it to the Black Mage. After hearing that name, Lennox realized that magic in that world did exist, and he began to think hard about how he could use magic there. Lennox was surprised again when the 2 men mentioned a tool called a Viper, which was known as a body strengthened. One of the men introduced his new Viper from Calvin Cubs. he said, even though he knew the side effects of the viper, but in order to make the workers obedient, he needed that tool. In his new viper, it seems that it has a strong liquid inside that reduces the poison. Moreover, the filter has mana. Lennox was even more shocked to hear all that, making his eyes not stop staring at the viper held by the man. Then something strange happened to him, where he felt a vibration radiating through his body, as if something was exploding inside his body. Lennox realized if that was the sixth sense, which exceeds all the rest, or the third eye, his alter ego. He grasped a new sense that he wasn't aware of until just now. It was always flowing in this world. He had only yet to recognize it. The fundamental power that makes up this world and the impetus that defines existence. Mana, swimming throughout the air, flowing into his body with his breath, this power which is both familiar and unfamiliar, is certainly the world's magic. Then from his hand came out a blue-colored flame, known as light, seeing that he smiled contentedly. At night, when all the workers were fast asleep, Lennox hid under his blanket, secretly trying to use the light, and said to himself that with this amount of mana, he would be able to escape. From the conversation he heard from the two men he saw at the exit, Lennox knew that in 2 days from now, there would be union members coming, and he was sure that on that day, the security would be weak. He then tried to think of how he could avoid attention and move alone. Suddenly, an idea popped into his head to use the same method as the last time he managed to sneak out. He would try to look like he was dying so that people would not pay attention to him. He then used light on his forehead to make him feel like he was feverish and like he was dying, so that would make it easier for him to move alone. On the other hand, Van is seen knocking on the door of the supervisor's room with a box containing a viper. When the door is opened, the supervisor thanks him for delivering the viper. As a thanks, the supervisor gave a viper to Van, but he refused it, but because he continued to force Van with a tense face, inevitably took the viper. Before Van left the place, the supervisor told him to take care of Lennox because he didn't want the union members to see him, making them look bad in front of the union members. Van nodded his understanding of what the supervisor meant, and then left. In the morning, the workers woke up from their sleep after hearing the alarm sounding from the speakers in the room. While they were all getting ready to welcome the union members, Lennox's condition was not good as he was so hot that sweat flooded his body. The workers who saw him talked if it seemed like he would die soon. They also threw responsibility to each other, because among them, no one wanted to touch him if he was already a dead body. Hearing the argument, in his mind Lennox felt happy, because his plan to trick them was successful. But suddenly there was someone's voice telling them all to move aside, and that person was none other than Van. At first, Lennox thought that Van would make him die early, but when Van turned his body around, he did not expect Van to give him a viper to temporarily increase his physical strength. Van said that although the viper was cheap, it was enough to help him survive on his path, and then he left. Although he didn't quite understand what Van meant, he couldn't help but end up using the viper to make him feel fit again. He was stunned in disbelief because it turned out that active enhancers could have such an effect. Then, because his plan to escape failed, Lennox changed his escape plan. On the underground floor of the loading factory Galligan, several workers were seen transporting some goods to be put on a car. Besides that, it was also seen that the supervisor was busy supervising their work, and occasionally there were workers being scolded for making mistakes. Then, on the other side, a union member was seen talking to one of the workers there. He scolded the man because the number of products did not match what he asked for. The man just looked down and apologized, but the union member arrogantly said that they were the ones who made the factory still running. They fired several workers there because of accusations from the Human Rights Commission. Therefore, shouldn't he have shown more sincerity in working? The man apologized again and again, and from a distance one of his friends who saw it was annoyed with the union member. While looking at the situation in front of him, he was surprised by the presence of a pale-faced man in front of him who was none other than Lennox. Lennox cautiously asked the man to help him open the director's office door because he had to bring the viper there. The man looked annoyed because Lennox asked him for help at a bad time because he was very busy. But since Lennox was carrying a very important item, the man took the key and told Lennox to follow him. On the way to the director's office, the man kept on nagging him, but because he was used to that kind of attitude, Lenik didn't care at all. When he arrived at the door of the director's office, the man immediately opened the door, but behind him, Lenik was ready to attack the man with his magic power. Using his power named Bolt, he choked the man until his mouth foamed, and soon the man fell. Lenik then picked up the key that had fallen near the man's body and entered the director's office sneakily to look for the Viper. Inside the room, Lenik accidentally found a gun in a drawer in the room. Not only that, he also found a jacket that he could wear. After a long search, finally Lenik managed to get the Viper he was looking for. While sitting, he looked at the Viper he got and thought it was a very extraordinary thing, because by using it, his fatigue and pain disappeared. Then, when he was about to use the Viper, he heard the sound of someone heading to the room. He then hurried to hide. Outside, the supervisor smelled the scent of Viper from inside the director's office. Because he was curious who the person was resting while he was busy working, he entered the room. Upon entering the room, he was surprised to see that a man named Mark was lying on the floor with his mouth foaming. In a careless state, Lenik took advantage of the situation to attack him using his magic, but unfortunately his attack was successfully avoided. The supervisor was surprised when the person in front of him used magic, so he questioned who he was, but after he observed the man's face, he realized that the man was Lenik. When his identity was known, Lenik felt confused because he didn't have enough mana to use Bolt anymore. The supervisor was then ready to attack him using his fists, but before his attack could hit him, Lenik pointed a gun at his supervisor, making his movements stop, and he stood still. He raised his hands tremblingly and begged Lenik to let him live. He apologized for all this time he had been mistreating him, but all that he did because he had no other choice but to carry out the orders assigned to him. He swore that he would not tell anyone about this incident as long as Lenik let him live. With a hateful gaze, Lenik didn't believe a word he said and kept the gun pointed at him. Suddenly, someone's voice from outside made Lenik hold the gun even tighter, making his supervisor even more depressed, and finally telling him the way out. He pointed to a door beside him and said that it led to the underground parking lot so he could get out of there. Lenik remained silent, at a loss as to what to do in such a situation. Meanwhile, on the other hand, a man was seen walking towards the director's office to look for someone. Feeling that the person he was looking for was in the room, he opened the door, but when he entered the room, his face changed, showing a sense of fear. Then a red car was seen heading towards the exit gate. It then stopped right in front of the portal. He then opened his car window and pointed a gun at the man in charge of guarding the gate and ordered him to open the gate. The man was terrified. He stammered and said he would open it, but he begged Lenik not to kill him. The portal in front of him finally opened. The man begged repeatedly not to kill him, but suddenly the speakers in his room turned on and a male voice was heard ordering him to close the gate. The man's voice came from the director's office, where he saw two bodies lying covered in blood. Knowing they had been killed, he immediately contacted the gate guard to close the door immediately, but out of fear the man had no other choice, because Lenik continued to intimidate him with the gun he was pointing in front of him. Thinking that opening the gate would save him turned out to be wrong. Before Lenik left, he said that if he let him live, it would only be a problem. Then there was a very loud gunshot, where he shot the man right in the head. Lenik then continued his journey, and in front of there he still had to pass another gate. He then stepped on the gas pedal even harder until his car accelerated and hit the portal until it was destroyed. The action finally succeeded in making Lenik escape from that torturous place and go far away from there. Meanwhile, at night, a magnificent city was seen where many luxurious buildings stood. In a building called Ox, a man was seen running to avoid an attack from a man who tried to shoot him. The man was running very fast. Unfortunately, his position was cornered, so he inevitably chose an extreme path where he broke the window in front of him and jumped from the high building. The three men who chased him called him a crazy man for jumping at such a great height. Besides that, they also didn't see the body, but according to him, the possibility of the man must have died. One of them then picked up the torn shirt with blood stuck in the broken glass. He also ordered his two colleagues to look for it below because they had to make sure to find the body. Then, underneath the building, bloodied shoe prints were seen leading to a place. The city turned out to be a city that was recognized as the city of Balkan magic techniques. That night, heavy vehicles passed through the city streets, and among the many vehicles there was one vehicle in which Lennox was driving. From inside his car, Lennox was amazed by the city that used magic everywhere. It was very different from World 2.0, and even better, everything had a bit of mana mixed in it. While on the road, he could feel a power similar to the power he felt in the factory, and from what he thought it probably meant that there was a large amount of mana distribution in the civilization of that world. After observing all the things around him, he felt that his body was getting weaker due to his overexertion while trying to escape from the factory. He then sighed and then took a look at the Viper box next to him. At first, he intended to use it, but he decided against it because he only had a few, and he would only use it in an emergency. Lennox continued to drive his car and planned to find a place for him to rest, until finally he arrived at a hotel. When he entered the room, his face was pale from exhaustion after an hour of driving to get to the hotel. Because his body was full of sweat, he opened his jacket and he walked to his bed. But before he arrived, he was exhausted and fell unconscious. Then in the middle of the night he woke up and felt thirsty. He walked towards the refrigerator and took a can of drink, then drank it until it ran out. But what did he expect? After drinking the drink, his heart was beating so fast and hard that he fell to the floor because he felt tremendous pain. Lennox couldn't catch his breath, causing him to breathe irregularly. He also felt nauseous, and his head ached. Moreover, the muscles in his body hurt like they were about to be torn apart. Lennox looked at his trembling hands and wondered if it was all the effects of the Viper stimulant. Even so, if he moved his body, he had no choice but to rely on the stimulant for now. After that, Lennox felt hungry because he had not eaten anything for more than 12 hours. He then tried to move to find food in the refrigerator. Luckily in there he found a canned food. Although eating canned food is annoying, but inevitably, he must still do it. While enjoying the food, the phone in front of him suddenly rang, and when he picked up the voice of a hotel employee who informed him that he had 2 hours left until checkout time, the employee asked if he wanted to extend his stay. Because it was late, Lennox extended his stay. Then the employee told him the details that Lennox had to pay, and it all had to be paid that day. The total he spent to stay there was 2,200,000 sel. After deducting the advance payment of 1,000,000 sel, the remaining amount he had to pay was 1,200,000 sel. Hearing that information, Lennox was surprised because he didn't expect the canned food he was currently eating to cost 10% of his stay. Lennox then reached into his pocket, and there he saw that his money was 1,300,000 sel, and after he paid for the hotel, he only had 1,000 sel left. Therefore, in that situation, it was certain that he would not be able to stay at the hotel tomorrow, and he needed more money. Before leaving the hotel, Lennox decided to take a shower and spruce himself up by cutting his hair so that no one would recognize him. After cutting his hair, his appearance looked a little different, with his shorter hair making his face look a little fresher. The next day, Lennox left the hotel, and he sat in front of a closed shop while watching people pass by. In his daydreams, he thought it would be very difficult for him to earn money legally, because in that world, he was an illegal visitor, and he didn't even have an identity. For him, it would probably be better to beat up criminals and take their money, because it certainly wouldn't get him in trouble. Before preparing for the action, he will first collect mana in his ears. It seems that now his entire body has been enveloped by a bright aura. While he is focusing on collecting mana, he hears the conversation of the people around him. Someone said that the new engineer at Palmer's, the one who inspected the new AI for errors, went missing. They'll probably hire a replacement. They're searching for an agency that will help lobby to get it. In his mind, Lennox said that this was not the kind of chat he was looking for. So he searched again. Then, after searching for a long time, he finally found the chat he was referring to. Lennox then rushed to the place where the chat came from. But when he was about to walk there, he got a pain in his head, making him lose his balance. He stayed in his place long enough to endure the pain, but because the pain did not go away, he was forced to finally use the Viper to restore his body's health. Meanwhile, in an alley not far from where Lennox was, there were two men beating someone. From their conversation, it was known that the two men ordered the man in front of him to steal, but unfortunately, the man lost his money, so the two men were so angry that they beat him up. To make up for his mistake, the two men tried to kill him for his organs so that they could sell them and get money. The man cried and begged them not to kill him, but the two men did not hear him at all and continued their action. Just as their weapons were about to hit the man, Lennox came and beat them with his bolt magic power to make the two men lie unconscious. Lennox then reached into the two men's pockets and found 7,000,000 sell. With that money, Lennox thought he could get some clothes and medicine. Not only did he find money, he also found an object shaped like a pen. Seeing Lennox holding the object made the man who was beaten scared, and asked Lennox not to point the object at him. The man explained that the object was called Dyke's laser cutter, but it had been legally converted and used as a weapon. Just in case, Lennox took the object and pocketed it in his jacket, because he thought that the more self-protection items he had, the better. As Lennox was about to leave, he looked at the man. The man looked frightened and said that he would not tell anyone about what he saw today. With a sharp look at the man, Lennox said that everyone could say that, and for Lennox to believe his words, the man asked him if there was anything he wanted from him. Instead of asking for money, Lennox simply asked the man for something. He said it had been a long time since he arrived in the city. He needed an illegal job with no laws. Then he asked if he knew of anyone who could do something without identification. It would be better if it was something that used magic. From the information provided by the man, Lennox came to a bar. From the outside appearance of the bar, Lennox thought it looked like a normal bar, but he thought it must be just a disguise, so he didn't need to show himself. With his magic, he then changed his appearance because for him in this world, he could not trust anyone but himself. Lennox entered the bar, and inside it looked like a normal bar. He then walked towards an old waiter. After ordering, he without hesitation told the waiter that he was looking for a job, and asked if there was anything that needed a mage. The waitress was silent, and soon a woman with long black hair appeared from inside the door of the bar. The woman told the waitress that the hours were still long, she had just overslept, and then asked what he was doing. The waitress then explained about the arrival of Lennox, who claimed to be a mage. Looking at Lennox's appearance, the woman didn't think he looked like that. Hearing that Lennox could only remain silent, feeling awkward, the woman then introduced herself. The woman's name was Jenny, and she then asked his name, but Lennox didn't say his real name and introduced himself as a man named Van. After the two were introduced to each other, Jenny said that Lennox must have come there because someone told him about that place, and he was currently looking for a job that could be done by a mage. Lennox heard that agreed to all Jenny's words, but to get a job there, Lennox had to show what abilities he could do because she was not so interested in people who called themselves mages, but could only learn a number of common magic. In addition, she also said that Lennox did not need to tell what inherent magic system he had, but he still had to tell what type he was. Before Jenny finished her words, Lennox immediately showed his magic ability. Jenny saw it amazed because the type of magic he had was lightning, which was very rare. In addition, Jenny also did not expect that Lennox could activate it without a magic circle or spell. After seeing Lennox's extraordinary magic ability, without hesitation, Jenny handed Lennox a paper containing a work contract. Jenny said that since he had come all the way there, Lennox could not be picky about the type of job he wanted to get. Hearing that Lennox didn't mind at all, he would accept any job except those related to beating humans. Jenny then said, if Lennox could make sure of the rest, because there was nothing like that in their work. Then Jenny handed Lennox a tablet to look at first. She explained that their job was bounty hunter. He would be paid immediately, and it was easy to determine the outcome, and the target this time was Taylor Evans. He was a scavenger, but 4 days ago, he tried to steal Achilles' security equipment. Hearing these words, Lennox concluded that he actually did not succeed in stealing the equipment. Seeing Lennox confused, Jenny explained that there was no way a lowly scavenger could break into Achilles' security, because the other scavengers who tried to steal it were all killed. He was the only one left who tried to steal it, after which Achilles withdrew from the case and handed it over to them. Then, since his affiliated scavenger branch also withdrew from the case, it wouldn't be a problem. After getting the job, Lennox left the bar, and while on the road he was still thinking about the reward Jenny had mentioned. If he managed to catch Taylor Evan, then he would get 3 million sell as a reward, although it wasn't much, but it wasn't too bad for catching a rat. After looking at the information on the tablet, Lennox asked if he could have the blood sample they collected. Jenny said she could give it to him, but it would all be useless. Jenny told him to stop if he was thinking of using a blood mage to catch him because those money-hungry people would ask for 5 million sell or more per case. Remembering that, Lennox then took out an envelope and opened it. Inside was a tear of Taylor's shirt that was left at the scene. He then made a cut of the bloodied shirt and said that if he didn't need a blood mage, he was sure he could easily use common magic to solve this case. At the hotel, Lennox remembered about his common magic. It was just what he said in World 2.0, but there were many in the list he made. The most suitable magic to use at the moment was the Hunter 2, 0-type magic class bloody chase. He then used the magic on Taylor's torn clothes that he got from Jenny. When using the magic, a red aura enveloped the torn clothes, and from inside it came out an aura shaped like a snake. The snake then walked to an abandoned station, where a person wearing a jacket was sitting in the corner. The snake approached him and stopped right behind the person's body, then disappeared. When the person looked back, it was discovered that it was Taylor. As he turned his head, he was shocked to find Lennox behind him with a terrifying stare as if he was ready to kill him. Because his hiding place was discovered, Taylor ran away from the place as fast as possible. He did not expect Lennox to find his hiding place. As he ran to avoid Lennox, behind him Lennox just casually walked after him while occasionally sighing in annoyance. He said to himself, he came there after making all the preparations to defend against the incoming attack, but when he got there his target ran away from him. For him it would be very difficult to run using his weak body, and he wasn't sure about long-range attacks either. That's why he needed a magic called a sound wave, which he then shot at Taylor's body until he fell down and covered his ears, complaining in pain because he heard a very loud sound. Lennox, who saw that, just looked at him sharply and said that Taylor shouldn't have run. Before finishing his words, a bullet rushed forward towards him. Luckily, just in case, Lennox had put up his barrier. Getting a sudden attack, Lennox became confused and tried to find the origin of the shot. Because he felt it was not safe, Lennox used his magic power to strengthen his barrier, where according to him at this level he could at least survive for some time if shot by an anti-tank missile. Besides that, he continued to look for the whereabouts of the sniper who was trying to shoot him, despite having detected mana using his magic power, but he didn't find anything within 1 kilometer. That meant either the sniper was shooting from a distance of more than 1 kilometer, or using camouflage so that the simple mana detector couldn't track the sniper, and it was probably one of these two situations. He also guessed what the reason the person was shooting at him in this appearance. He also tried to reanalyze the location of the damaged barrier and the direction of the shot. After thinking hard, he found a very surprising fact that he was not the target of the sniper, but Taylor. Lennox then turned to Taylor, who was still in pain. In his mind, he felt that the sniper was trying to silence him. To him, it didn't matter because he didn't care what happened to them. But it was a different matter if they were involved in his problem. Lennox then pointed his gun at Taylor and said to himself that he had no intention of letting the sniper who tried to kill Taylor in front of him go. He couldn't let the figure of Hunter Van, who had now become his identity, become a silly show. Taylor, who saw the mouth of the gun in front of his eyes, could only cry in fear while begging Lennox not to kill him. But Lennox ignored his words and mercilessly shot Taylor in the head. For Lennox, the more ruthless and cold-blooded he became, the fewer people would stand in his way. Sniper, who saw the incident from a distance, was shocked by what he saw. Lennox then looked behind him and realized that the sniper was on top of one of the buildings there, because when he killed Taylor, the sniper's mana flow had become chaotic, so that he managed to find him. Meanwhile, the sniper started, anxiously afraid of his whereabouts being known, and on the other hand, Lennox had found out if the sniper was within 1 kilometer. He then cast a magic that he thought was very suitable for that type of distance. Among the common magic he remembered that had power that could be held in one hand, The magic that represented light magic was thunder calling. From Lennox's palm came blue lightning bolts. He then raised his hand up, and then slowly the lightning bolts disappeared from his hand. Sniper, who saw the action, was astonished to see Lennox seemingly retracting his magic and wondered what his purpose was. While busy thinking about it, suddenly there was a very loud rumbling from above his head, and when he looked up, there were so many lightning bolts in the sky. Lennox then shot the lightning bolts towards the sniper until it was a very bright flash on top of the building. Seeing that, Lennox could only breathe a sigh of relief and boast of his magic power, which he thought was so extraordinary that his level was different from what he saw in the game. With his power like that, he could tell others confidently that he was now a lightning mage. Lennox then came to the top where the sniper was and saw that part of the area there had been destroyed by his magic, but after he observed the area, he realized that the sniper had run away because he didn't see any traces of the sniper at all. According to him, the sniper was clearly not an ordinary person. He began to doubt whether he needed to pursue the sniper or not, but after he thought about it again, it seemed that what he had done earlier was enough as a warning for him, and was clearly more than enough to make Van's lightning mage known. After completing his mission, Lennox came back to the bar carrying a bag containing the dead body of Taylor Evans. His arrival surprised all the visitors at the bar. Quickly, the old waiter who was there told Lennox to enter through the back door and told him to always use that door when it came to work. Then, in a room, the waiter began to examine Taylor's body. From what he saw, he knew that the cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head. Besides the gunshot wound, there were traces of a wounded ear. Not only that there were no other changes, seeing that the body was still in one piece, he was very sure that the body was Taylor. Hearing such a detailed explanation, Lennox then asked the waiter if he was a coroner. While closing the bag containing Taylor's dead body, the waitress replied that he did a job similar to that. He also asked Lennox if he wanted to take his reward now, and the question was immediately answered by Lennox with a nod of the head. The waiter explained that the reward he would get was 2,700,000 sel after deducting the 10% processing fee. If he wanted to receive money by other methods, there would be an additional processing fee. Confused by those words, Lennox asked again about the method the waiter was referring to. The waiter replied that the method he meant was like borrowing the name of a bank account, bonds, or stocks, because there are times when people ask for complicated money laundering methods. Hearing that, Lennox finally understood that the financial regulations in the Balkans were similar to those on Earth. Soon Jenny appeared and praised Lennox's fast work, because usually with this type of bounty hunting, it took more time to find targets and then kill them. Jenny was then curious about the talent that Lennox actually had to be able to find and kill his targets so quickly. Lennox answered her casually by saying that what he did was just because he was lucky. The two then looked at each other without speaking at all. Soon Jenny smiled and said to Lennox because he had shown that he was worthy of this job, so she had no problem if he continued to work with her. Lennox then said he didn't mind at all if Jenny gave him another job right now, but his words were immediately answered by Jenny if that would never happen, and she told him to get out of there and rest. She said that now she had to hand over Taylor's body to Achilles and find out what the scavenger was planning. As Jenny was about to leave, Lennox asked her if it was because she didn't trust him yet. With a sweet smile, Jenny replied that it seemed like the two of them were on the same page, and she thought it was safe to say that they still needed time to get to know each other as well as dating. Seeing Jenny's behavior, Lennox felt that the real reason was not that, but there were other reasons that he might not know. Having no other choice, Lennox finally excused himself and left while Jenny stared at his departure meaningfully. After Lennox left, the old waiter gave Jenny an information where he tried to break into the scavenger network and found something interesting that Lennox's mission had been recorded. Jenny looked at the footage and was amazed by the incredible power Lennox showed in the footage. The next day, Lennox went to the Balkan City Library to find out about the magic system in that world and find a way to increase his lifespan, which was eroding like wax melting due to the karma system. He believed that there must be magic related to time, and there must also be a solution among the unique high-rank magic. In the library, he was seen reading several books about magic, and he found a book that discussed the mana pattern. He then practiced the method taught by the book. Lennox successfully used it and saw the mana pattern. From what he knew, it was said that level 8 archmages and above could modify the mana pattern. With that, he began to wonder how strong level 8 was. He again tried to release some mana. He was surprised when the pattern changed once the mana came out. Although he didn't know how strong level 8 was, but he was sure he must be talented in that regard. He smiled contentedly while looking at his hand that had mana on it. In the afternoon, after he read some books there, his face looked confused because it was a little different from his expectations, where the concept of common magic that he knew had completely disappeared. Magic can be categorized into two major categories: unique magic and common magic. Unique magic was a single type of magic that could be learned by each mage, which was more socialized and powerful. On the other hand, common magic is neither deep nor powerful, but there are many variations of applying the element or target. At least that is the case in World 2.0. But in this world, there was no mention of common magic. Therefore, he became confused as to how he should use it. Lennox reread the book while holding his head because he felt confused, because no matter how talented Lennox was, it would be useless if the concept did not exist. Despite having read so many books, he still had so many questions, and unfortunately, he didn't get any new information from the books he read. In addition, he also did not find any unique magic related to time. Lennox sighed, then suddenly heard someone tell him to just give up. When he turned to the origin of the voice, he saw a beautiful blonde woman standing behind him. The woman told Lennox to just give up if he hoped to become a mage. Lennox was confused by the woman's words and just looked at her without saying anything. Seeing him confused, the woman continued her sentence again by saying that hope will only make people suffer. Hearing that, Lennox was even more confused, and the woman told him again that hope would only make him sad, even though Lennox had read books all day. But that would not make him a mage because he was too late to try to become one. He should study things like magic engineering theory. According to her, Lennox could only learn magic by going to school or university if he couldn't find a teacher. But she said he couldn't go to university without a foundation, and even if he was lucky, he wouldn't get anything out of the lessons. There was nothing he could do on his own, because it was a field of study where talent and luck played a big role. If all he had was a burning passion, her words were cut short upon seeing the innocent face of the confused Lennox. The woman then apologized to him, and she didn't know why she had told all this to a stranger. Carrying the books she had collected, the woman told Lennox that it was past closing time, and she asked Lennox to tidy up the books and leave. As she was about to walk away, the woman was surprised when Lennox asked her about whether the advice she had given was her own experience. While tidying up his books, Lennox stood up from his seat and said that if she was a student, it was not too early to give up because instead of giving up, it was better to try everything she could first. Lennox then left the woman, but as he was leaving, the woman called out to him. The woman then approached him and gave him a business card while saying that Lennox was very silly, and she didn't think that Lennox would accept her advice with his attitude. The woman promised that if Lennox came back next time, she would show him some magic. Then the woman left. Seeing the woman leave, Lennox muttered to himself that the woman was very strange, and then he looked at the business card the woman gave him. When he saw it on the business card, the name was written Eris Richelin, Elemental Magic Faculty Chair Professor, which turned out that the woman was a professor. After returning from the library, on the way, Lennox was still thinking about his meeting with the woman. He did not expect the young woman to be a professor, because from her face, she clearly looked younger than him. Lennox then planned to go buy groceries. When he arrived at the market, there was a very crowded market. While busy thinking about what he should buy, he suddenly heard the sound of a policeman who was conducting checks on visitors there. Seeing that, Lennox panicked, but he tried to calm down and went away from the police. Soon he met a woman who called him because she was suspicious of Lennox's panicked behavior. The woman asked if he had done something wrong or something because he kept glancing at the policeman who was checking Mana's pattern, as if he had committed a crime. From what the woman said, Lennox realized that the Mana pattern was like a fingerprint. Then he saw the police officer using a tool for examination. The woman asked him again about his purpose for coming there. Lennox tried to answer the woman's question as casually as possible. He said he came there to buy some vegetables, and after talking with the woman for a while, he found out that she was the owner of the booth. Lennox looked at the woman and said to himself whether she was lying or not, but she was a very beautiful woman. Since Lennox looked confused about what vegetables to buy, the woman recommended him to buy the onions that were there because they were very good for insomnia. Lennox was actually a little annoyed that she saw him as a sick man, but it didn't matter to him. Lennox ended up buying the onion along with other vegetables he needed for cooking. But as he was putting the vegetables into his grocery bag, he was surprised because suddenly the woman said that his mana was quite unique. Then the aura between them changed. The woman told him what a mage like him was doing there. Lennox tried to remain calm and acted like he didn't know what the woman meant. Lennox was even more surprised when the woman found out that he had just visited the Valkan. Lennox wondered who exactly the woman was, why she knew all this. Not only did she realize that he was a mage, but she also talked about his mana pattern. In a jumble of thoughts, the woman snapped him out of his reverie by handing him his purchases and telling him the total amount of money he had to pay. Still in a state of shock, Lennox then paid for his groceries and hurriedly left. After a few steps, he looked back at the woman. Lennox wondered silently if the woman saw the mana pattern coming out of the sheer barrier. She could see the mana pattern with the naked eye. Even the police at that time still used tools to do so. Lennox thought either she had the skill for it, or the woman was a powerful mage. No matter which, it wasn't something good for him. He did not expect that he would be caught by a stranger, so from now on, he had to be more careful with his magic. After that day, Lennox spent his days in his room researching about magic in order to improve the efficiency of the ordinary magic he already knew. But he still did not find any clues about inherent magic. Moreover, his body condition did not improve at all. Since she had to rely on medicine for the time being, he needed a clear identity and enough money to get better medicines. For all of that, he tried to ask Jenny for help. Luckily, it turned out that she could do it, but the cost was very expensive at 20 million sell. Hearing that Lennox just fell silent, seeing him seem shocked by the price, she said, Jenny asked him not to worry about it because she intends to offer Lennox a new job. According to her, there are many jobs that can be done casually, but make a lot of money with his magic. Lennox asked what the job was, then Jenny replied that this time the job was a business request. Seeing Lennox still confused, Jenny explained to him that the job would give him more money than he hunted down fugitives. Although Jenny knew that Lennox preferred to hunt down fugitives, but when thinking about income, Lennox should try to accept business requests. She then invites Lennox to talk elsewhere, because it looks like this time their conversation will be more serious. In a room, Jenny explained that the target of this requisition was the Charlotte Company's new makeup factory in District 42. 80% of the construction costs were paid for by the government, so there was drama because of that, as the moisturizer they were supposed to make was going through human testing. The Charlotte Company is famous for its anti-aging techniques that can even replenish dead skin. There is evidence that they even skinned people's faces in the development process. It seems that they intend to recreate the perfect environment or else. Still confused by what was explained, Lennox said, "Isn't the truth already proven? Then what other work should be done?" Jenny laughed at his naive question. She said there was no way a big company like Charlotte would just give up their factory. They even took money from the government. Lennox is still busy looking at the information on the laptop in front of him. Jenny told him that the requester was the Varitz Company. From what she observed, their company had just entered the makeup business and wanted to win against its rival, Charlotte. Varitz's request had only two conditions. The first was to hack after the intrusion, 350 million sell for Charlotte's makeup manufacturing data. If he didn't want to do the first one, then the second one was 50 million sell to destroy the factory until it couldn't be rebuilt. After hearing that, Lennox thought that the first stipulation sounded impossible to him, and Jenny thought the same because she thought that 350 million sell would not be enough to hire someone who could infiltrate and retrieve the data. She thought they probably just wanted to see which idiot would accept that when the real demand was to destroy the factory. After considerable deliberation, Lennox accepted the job, and his decision was enthusiastically welcomed by Jenny and would introduce the colleague who did the work with him. Lennox was surprised because Jenny didn't say that to him at first. Before he could protest, the door was suddenly opened by a man who looked very unique, wearing a tight costume that wrapped his body to his face. The man greeted him casually, and then Jenny introduced him. The man's name was Dylan O'Casey, a mercenary affiliated with Antares. He was famous for his low fee. After the introduction, Dylan protested Jenny's introduction because he didn't want Lennox to think of him as a pathetic person. Lennox and Dylan shook hands and introduced themselves again. Then he asked Jenny why she needed a partner on this job. According to him, this job looks like it would be too difficult for just one person to do. Dylan replied that he could have done it himself, but Jenny said she was going to hire more people, so he waited. Jenny gave Dylan an annoyed look. Then Lennox said that he would have preferred it if Jenny had told him first that he would be working with someone else. Because she felt guilty, Jenny said that she wouldn't take any part of the job's pay at all, so that the pay would only be split between them. Seeing Jenny admitting her mistake so easily made him suspect that it was all deliberately done by Jenny. Maybe she wanted to test how far he could cross his limits. If she did it again, then Lennox would solve it himself, especially now that he already held the advantage in this connection. While Lennox was busy in his thoughts, Jenny and Dylan were busy arguing because Jenny thought she didn't get any part of the job because of Dylan. The two then fight, and Jenny manages to defeat him. In Dylan's helpless state, Jenny excitedly says that they must start this job, and before that she invites them both to see the blueprints of the factory. Meanwhile, in District 42, there were quiet streets. Unlike the undeveloped districts of District 50, District 40s, especially the low-numbered ones, had adequate facilities, though compared to the high-numbered districts, they were satisfactory. Lennox and Dylan had reached District 42 and were seen walking towards the factory. On the way, Dylan tried to have a conversation with Lennox. He said that he felt Jenny seemed to respect him a lot when he knew that normally Jenny was not the type of woman to give in easily to money. Normally, she would take the cost of the process, but he felt Jenny thought maintaining a good relationship with him was a better option. He was very sad that Jenny never did that for him. Dylan then walked past Lennox, walking away. Lennox observes him from behind and realizes that while at the bar, Dylan was listening to all their conversations. He understands that Dylan is actually the type of person who hides his true self with a flashy appearance. Then suddenly Dylan turned to him and gave him a business card. In his opinion, Lennox did not need to stay in one place to work. Lennox also realized that Dylan was currently trying to recruit him. With a cheerful face, Dylan said there was no harm in making friends with as many mages as possible. He thought his office would suit Lennox, even though the office might be a little rough. But there they had many people who were very skilled in using their bodies like him. After boasting about himself, Dylan made a pleading face, asking Lennox to keep what they were talking about right now a secret from Jenny. Hearing that, Lennox could only smile and nod his head, then left Dylan, who was still busy posing. Lennox said Dylan was very good at talking. He would decide when he saw if Dylan's work was that good. Meanwhile, in front of Charlotte's company, there were several people on guard. From afar, Lennox hid to watch their movements. From what he observed, the security there did not seem very strict. More precisely, too careless. While Lennox was watching, Dylan was seen wiping his knife. Amidst the scrutiny, Dylan said who would be crazy enough to take on a big company like Charlotte. Initially, he wasn't interested in this job at all, but since Fritz asked him to do it, he agreed. Although the security there was arguably not that tight, the security guards were from the 888, where they were all former criminals and thugs. So the quality of their security guards was the lowest among the other company's security. That meant they would feel little guilt, even if they accidentally killed one or two of them. Not talking much, Lennox invited Dylan to start their work, but Dylan stopped him because he saw that Lennox did not cover his face at all so as not to be recognized. According to him, even though their security was poor, his identity should not be revealed. He then presented a strangely shaped mask. Lennox immediately rejected it and left there while Dylan tried to persuade him, because if his identity was recognized, then it would be very dangerous. Because Dylan continued to force him, Lennox had no other choice. He pulled his collar up to cover part of his face, after which they immediately started their work. The strategy for this request was quite simple. As Dylan infiltrated the factory through the back door and attracted attention, Lennox would enter through the storage, head straight inside and destroy the factory. Dylan then said goodbye to do his part. While going about his task, Dylan looked very different as his gaze became more serious. Without further ado, Dylan immediately darted towards a guard and beat him up. Lennox saw it looking amazed, because the person behind the strange costume looked very different from what he thought. Dylan continued the action. He beat up the other guards. Meanwhile, using his viper, Lennox walked towards the storage door and was about to start his part. But when he got there, it turned out that the door was locked, so he took a tool that he took from the thugs he had previously defeated. He used the tool and managed to open the door. He then entered and met a man who pointed a gun at him. The man looked so scared that his body was shaking. He stutteredly ordered Lennox to raise both hands. Looking like an ordinary security guard, Lennox took out his magic, Nature Sleep, and he used it on the security guard. The security guard looked like he was nodding off, and then slowly fell asleep. Because he thought that a civilian did not need to be sucked into the explosion, he took out his magic power again, namely Marionette, to transport the body of the security guard to get out of there. The security guard was then like a puppet moved by a string, out of the factory. Meanwhile, Lennox, who had managed to get into the factory, walked down the stairs there, but without realizing it in the factory, there was a creepy creature that was waiting for their arrival. Meanwhile, outside the factory, Dylan was still busy slaughtering the guards there. After defeating them all, he finally entered the factory. He was very careful for fear that there were still other guards inside the factory. Feeling that the situation there was safe, he entered the factory, but who would have thought he was surrounded by several shooters who marked him with lasers. On his face, there was no panic or fear at all, but he was very enthusiastic about it all. One of the shooters there tried to order Dylan to kneel, because if not, then he would not hesitate to shoot him. Dylan ignored the threat. He took the knife he had prepared and prepared to attack them all. As fast as lightning, Dylan ran to the shooters and easily knocked them all down. It did not end there. Then came another shooter who immediately shot him, but with his extraordinary speed, Dylan managed to outwit the shooters and then attacked them mercilessly. On the other hand, after Lennox went down the stairs, he arrived at a gas temperature system control room. He then took out the gas and prepared to start a fire with his magic, Ignite. For him, making fire was not difficult. He only needed elementary ignition magic. All he had to do now was to make the spell active after Dylan and he left the factory. He then thought he should thank the greengrocer woman he met at the market, because after he met her, he did it for the change and utilization of common magic, which taught him that simple common magic could be combined with a timer. After setting the fire to burn in 5 minutes with his magic, he planned to leave the place, but suddenly from outside the room came a very strange sound. Not only Lennox, Dylan, who was still busy beating up the shooters, also heard the sound, and felt that the two of them would get into trouble. Then a creature like a talking crocodile was seen saying whether he was really making a big deal there. Lennox, who heard that, hurriedly approached Dylan. When he opened the door, he was surprised to see a creature with a human-like appearance standing right in front of Dylan. Lennox then hid while watching the two of them. His face showed a look of fear because he had never seen such a creature shaped like a crocodile. When he saw Dylan, he seemed very relaxed to meet the creature, greeting him and saying that they had not seen each other for a long time. The creature returned the greeting and asked about the news of the person named Andreas. Dylan seemed reluctant to respond, but he still replied to his words and said if the person named Andreas was currently in good condition and he was living healthily. Not only that, but the creature also said that he doubted that Andreas said he wanted to start a business and go out on his own, feeling like he had an ulterior motive. Dylan replied that his boss was pretty great, but his words were laughed at by the creature. From their conversation, it turns out that the creature was also sent by someone with a payment of 10 billion if it successfully completes the job. When he heard the nominal mentioned, Lennox was very surprised while Dylan was downcast. Seeing Dylan, who was not excited, the creature said that this time he would make his death painless for Andreas. With a lazy look on his face, Dylan said if it wasn't that easy he could kill him. Before they fought, he asked the creature to give him his bag that had fallen nearby. While laughing, the creature threw the bag towards Dylan while mocking the contents of the bag as a toy. For Dylan, although he thought it was a toy, he thought it would hurt too much to be just a toy. Then Dylan, with a serious look, looked at the creature as if he was ready to face it. Unlike what he expected, Dylan got an unexpected attack that made him bounce off the wall. The creature smiled with satisfaction that Dylan was still as stupid as ever. Dylan was so annoyed that his spear didn't work well today that he ended up taking a beating from the annoying creature in front of him. He then took out another weapon from his bag, but again he could not counter the creature's attack, and in the end, his body hit the wall again. Lennox, who was hiding, saw it all, and did not think that Dylan could be defeated by the strange creature. Lennox was astonished that Dylan attacked only with strength alone. He also thought hard about what steps he should take next, because at this time the fire would ignite in 2 minutes 17 seconds. If they didn't get out of the factory as soon as possible, then they would die, and their task would fail. Seeing Dylan act like that without considering running, he was sure that Dylan was currently very enthusiastic about defeating the creature, but from what he observed, the creature was certainly at a different level from him. In this situation, Lennox said that he would just do what he could, and then get out of there. Lennox then sneaked around while unleashing his magic power. Meanwhile, Dylan looked pitiful in front of the creature, as he had been repeatedly hit by its attacks without being able to retaliate in the slightest. Being humiliated like that made him even more excited. So he took out a weapon from behind his body and challenged him while saying if he now felt bloodthirsty on him. Then, with lightning speed, Dylan attacked the creature, but he managed to block his attack using his hands. Not only that, Dylan continued to try to attack by utilizing the speed he had. Dylan managed to make it difficult for the creature to find his whereabouts. The creature was caught off guard. Then from behind him Dylan appeared and immediately slashed the creature's back. The creature was shocked and tried to find the existence of Dylan, who had now disappeared in front of him. Shortly Dylan reappeared and prepared to attack him, but this time his attack was successfully parried. Even he felt that the creature's movements were now faster than usual. Not wanting to be defeated by the creature, Dylan attacked it again and managed to hit the creature. The creature looked very exhausted because he had to adjust his attack speed. He also tried to hit Dylan. Fortunately, when the punch almost hit his face, Lennox attacked the creature using a lightning bind to make him feel like he was hit by an extraordinary electric attack. He screamed in pain, while Dylan was confused because he didn't expect Lennox to help him. At that moment, Dylan seized the opportunity to kill him, but when he unexpectedly attacked him using his tail, his body bounced and was caught. The creature then strangled Dylan while asking why he didn't tell him that he had a friend who was a mage. Dylan couldn't answer at all because the creature's choke was so strong. Dylan could only surrender when the creature hit him in the face, causing him to bounce out of the factory and crash to the ground. After the creature defeated Dylan, his target this time was to find the mage who attacked him. On the other hand, after using his power, Lennox looked so exhausted that his breathing was irregular. He remembered how extraordinary the creature's strength was, because when he was hit by his lightning bind attack, he looked fine, even though the power was strong enough to tire steel. Therefore, Lennox was sure that the winner had now been decided. Lennox then searched for Dylan's whereabouts, and he managed to find him, but his condition looked very worrying because he couldn't move his body anymore. When Lennox asked about his condition, Dylan sadly kept calling his mother while crying. Hearing that Lennox could finally breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that she was still alive. Since his body was already weakened, Lennox had no other choice but to use speed reinforcement. Due to mana's addictive characteristics, Lennox avoided concentrating mana in his body, but this was not the time for him to worry about that. When his body was strong enough after using that power, Lennox carried Dylan's body with him and walked away from the factory as it was about to explode. Meanwhile, inside the factory, the creature was still busy searching for Lennox's whereabouts. He had been to several places, but he did not find him at all. Then, while searching, he suddenly felt a strange feeling like something was going to happen. Then soon time ran out, and the fire ignited and caused a huge explosion there, making the factory destroyed until it was not left. That night, The sky and the stars, as well as the factory where they were fighting, witnessed a very large explosion that shook almost the entire city. The explosion even produced very thick smoke and factory debris scattered everywhere. However, Dylan and Lennox, who had previously left the factory, managed to survive and were at a safe point from the factory explosion. Apart from that, they are also protected by a barrier so that they are not affected by the impact of the explosion. Dylan said that he felt like all the bones in his body had broken. He couldn't move and just lay there. Then he forced himself to get up and Lennox asked if he could stand. Because Lennox had used a skill that used up quite a lot of mana, he then took something out of his jacket pocket and drank it. Dylan, who saw Lennox drinking a small bottle, asked what he was drinking and whether it was a stimulant to increase physical strength. He said that yes, it is a stimulant to improve physique. Then Dylan said that he had heard that it had serious side effects, but he took it without any problems, meaning it was very safe while stretching his body from the very tiring fight against the old lizard monster. Then not long after Lennox drank the liquid, he seemed to regain strength and said that his task might be successful. Instantly, his eyes lit up, and his cheeks had electric streaks after he drank the liquid. Then he said to Dylan that he was strong enough to be able to withstand attacks from those annoying crocodile motorbikes. Then he asked if that was really how superhumans wore their growth while looking at him. Then Jalen said that he didn't know it either, but he took it as a compliment while stretching his muscles again. Then, because he saw Lennox, who was still very relaxed with the energy drink he was holding, Dylan approached him, pulled his clothes, said that he should take care of it later, and told him to get up because they had to get out of there immediately. Then Lenovo said, take what he thought was still alive, because it seems like an attack like that might not necessarily defeat him directly and make him die. Hearing this question, Dylan immediately answered that he didn't even just think about it, but in fact, he was still alive. Then Dylan asks Lennox if he doesn't know who the old crocodile lizard is. But Lennox didn't have an answer, which meant he didn't know. While rubbing his forehead and exhaling a long breath, Dylan looked annoyed because Lennox didn't know anything and said that Lennox had been living in the mountains or somewhere, so he didn't know who the old lizard was. Then he explained that the old lizard was Crocon Acillus from Pandemonium. Hearing this made Lennox even more curious about what Crocon Acillus was. The huge explosion had destroyed the factory where they had fought, until now only rubble and rubble remained from the factory, which looked like a tomb for the old lizard monster. But not long after, another explosion appeared and it turned out to be a lizard monster rising from the rubble that fell on him. He was not injured at all, and only a little of his clothes were burned due to the huge explosion. Then he got back up and got ready and looked for those bastard rats who had almost killed him in the explosion and said that he would kill them all. Then Dylan explained that the old lizard monster was a war veteran, and after he retired from being a hitman, he worked as an executive at Pandemonium. Apart from that, he also collaborated with several other assassins and executives in Pandemonium. Pandemonium itself is an international criminal organization that only accepts high-level and powerful criminals to join them. But he could become an executive there very easily. Dylan explained all this while being supported by Lennox because his body was now helpless. Lennox said that he couldn't imagine what kind of organization would make a monster like him become an executive in that organization. Then they were shocked again by an explosion behind them, and it turned out that the explosion came from the lizard monster who was now standing behind them again and seemed to be preparing to kill and crush their heads with both hands. The remains of the burning building then fell on the monster, but he held it so tightly that even the falling flames did not hurt him. He looks very scary and very strong. Dylan and Lennox, who saw him again, were very scared and immediately prepared to run away from the scary old lizard monster. However, it seemed like the old lizard monster didn't want to lose them until he immediately ran and moved very quickly to reach them from where he was, and in just a few seconds he was close to them and reached Lennox and Dylan, then attacked with his strength. Lennox then managed to dodge the attack, but Dylan seemed to be affected by the attack until he fell, and his mouth was bleeding from being hit by the old lizard monster's attack. Then the very strong lizard monster then destroyed the floor, because it used its claws to break its body, which was too fast. Seeing the extraordinary abilities of the motor lizard, Lennox said that even though this was a world where one could strengthen the body with mana, what just now was cheating. Then the lizard monster took his hand, which was planted on the floor, and then said that maybe the skinny guy was the mage who attacked him before. Then he said that Lennox looked too young for a mage. However, when Lennox looked at Dylan, Dylan was now lying unconscious, and he thought it was impossible to escape with Dylan now because his condition didn't allow it. He was worried about Dylan that it didn't look like he was dead, because he then coughed, and that meant he wasn't dead. Now Lennox thought that if he had to fight against the old lizard monster, he had to finish it as quickly as possible. The old lizard monster looks very scary with black flames now surrounding its body from behind. Then the lizard monster walked towards Lennox, and Lennox thought that because the longer he fought, the less likely he was to win. Lennox is now preparing to attack the very ugly, annoying old lizard monster. They were now facing each other, and the difference in their bodies was so great that the lizard monster looked like a bloodthirsty giant, ready to pounce and even swallow Lennox in one bite. Then he asked Lennox if he was the one who used lightning magic, and added that no one had told him that it was rude to burn someone's feet. With a cool attitude, Lennox then replied that how could he care when the lizard was not even a human. Hearing this, the ugly, annoying old lizard then laughed out loud and said that Dylan had brought a brave man. If Lennox hadn't destroyed the factory, perhaps he would have let it live. But there was no other choice, because he had to work for the money he had received. Then the terrible lizard monster launched an attack using its sharp claws at Lennox and said that he would give Lennox a painless death. The terrible grip of the claws was now right in front of Lennox's face, but Lennox then released his ability, namely gravity bind. Then suddenly the ugly old lizard monster's attack was blocked by Lennox's strength, who came out of a portal and then tied his hands and feet together to restrain the lizard monster that was attacking Lennox. But when he was restrained by that ability, the ugly old lizard laughed out loud and said that it was just a cheap trick. How could he pull off such an ugly trick? However, Lennox explained that the heavier the target, the stronger the gravity bind's pulling power and the more difficult it will be to break free. Then, very confidently, the ugly old lizard monster said that he would try it. And sure enough, he very easily broke the bonds of Lennox's gravity bind power and destroyed him. Seeing this, Lennox then released gravity bind again from 5 points at once to attack and restrain the ugly old lizard monster again. Lennox continued to try to restrain the old lizard until finally the force of the gravity pine bound its entire body, even its mouth and long snout, and now he finally shut up. But Lennox realized that this wouldn't hold him back long enough, but at least it helped him, and he had to use the remaining energy to finish him off to finish this fight. Then, he released an energy from his hand and prepared to throw it at the ugly old lizard. However, the monster saw the huge energy coming out of Lennox's palm, making him even more angry and screaming and roaring until the force of the gravity bind that bound him had now been destroyed. And now he was free from the bonds that held him. He looked very angry, and he said that he would destroy Lennox's body and tear him apart. Hearing this threat made Lennox unable to remain silent, and then said that he could not die at the hands of an ugly monster like him. Then he released energy again from both hands and condensed them into one. He thought that in a situation where his life was at stake, he did not intend to save the slightest energy. Then the power gathered in his 2 hands and prepared to destroy that annoying, ugly old lizard. Lennox, who couldn't hold back all his strength and wanted to finish the fight immediately, said that he wouldn't save his strength anymore because his life depended on it all. Then he gathered strength from both palms until they looked very large, and blue energy filled his palms. He even absorbed all the energy from the surroundings and compressed it into one in his 2 hands. The terrifying old lizard monster then prepared himself by trying to run towards him while his legs were still bound by Lennox's good gravity, and asked what he was trying now. And now all the energy that he had compressed into his 2 hands had gathered and looked very strong. Now it was time for him to attack the old lizard monster using that energy and strength. Then, at the same time, The old lizard monster, which had been released from Lennox's gravity bind, then nimbly ran and moved very quickly toward Lennox and prepared to attack. At that time, Lennox had gathered energy and was preparing to throw it at the monster. Then at the same time, Lennox immediately touched the ground and let the energy he had gathered earlier become a form of power, where it was Frost Soul, which released freezing power, and then froze the ugly old lizard monster into a lump of ice. Now the old lizard monster has a book. Lennox thought it seemed like he was overreacting so much that the power of having a child also had an impact on Dylan, who looked very cold, and even had some snow and ice on his body. He said that the power made his body feel so desperate that it wanted to die. Then, Lennox asked if Dylan was still alive. Dylan then said that of course he was still alive because the Gore-Tex suit he was wearing was the most suitable for cold conditions, but said that it's not just waterproof. Dylan didn't know that and asked him again if it was true that's why he felt cold. Then he said that before the ugly lizard old man got out of there, they had to get out of that place first while cleaning his body from the snow chunks caused by Lennox's power. Lennox also thought that it seemed like the lizard monster might come out soon. And sure enough, when he looked at the chunk of ice that had frozen the lizard monster, they saw that now his eyes were glowing yellow, and the chunk of ice seemed to be starting to crack. Seeing this condition, the two of them were now panicking again, and Dylan said that they had to do something before he damaged the ice. But now Lennox's mana was almost gone, and he kept thinking about what to do. However, it seems he had an idea about that, and he said to Dylan that he would end this fight with that ability. Dylan then asked what Lennox would do to end this fight. Then Lennox thought that he could use common magic, which was specifically used to support long-range weapons with just a little mana. Then he took something under his outer robe and he took out a weapon. Turns out, it was shooting combo magic. He had used it many times when he played Magic Marksman in World 2.0. Then Lennox activated the trajectory guidance and penetration reinforcement abilities as well as projectile acceleration. Until now, the power in the weapon has gathered. Lennox thought that this gun couldn't withstand that much mana, but that wasn't a problem because the battle was over. Meanwhile, now the chunk of ice that froze the lizard monster has begun to crack and partially disintegrate. Seeing this, Lennox immediately launched an attack using his pistol with aim assist, and then fired it immediately towards the frozen lizard monster which had started to destroy the chunks of ice that were holding it. The shot managed to hit it and shattered the chunk of ice that was holding the ugly lizard monster. Even the shot sent the lizard monster flying far away. Then Dylan approached him and said that he had no idea that Lennox was also using a weapon. Then he praised it and said that it was so extraordinary that Lennox even looked at the ugly lizard's eyes and wondered if he would fall this time. Lennox then answered that it should be like that, because he no longer had the strength and ability to fight him any further. But it seems like it's in vain. The lizard monster woke up and its body looked like it had not been hit by any attack. Now the only different thing was one of its eyes which was destroyed. Then he said that that was a very good attack. Seeing the lizard monster get back up, they were both very shocked and couldn't believe that such a powerful attack still couldn't defeat it. Then the annoying lizard monster said that such a powerful attack would not work if he was its opponent. The lizard monster is back, even though one eye is now damaged. And apparently, he stopped the bullet with his eyelids. Lennox thought that so far he had used 4 kinds of support magic to fire it, but he stopped the bullet even with just his eyelids. The monster was terrifying. Then the lizard monster began to scream and was so angry that he said that Lennox was not wrong for saying that. And he added that he also didn't feel like a normal human being. Then he held his eye and took out the bullet that was embedded in his eyelid and said that the attack and the shot he fired did hurt a little. Dylan and Lennox looked very amazed at how he could do something like that, and he even took the bullet out of his eye so easily. Now the situation was reversed, where the two of them were no longer able to do anything. He was no longer able to attack that annoying old lizard monster. Lennox also realized that now he had no mana left, and he thought that then he had no choice but to use the last of his strength to defeat the lizard monster. Then the two of them prepared with their respective weapons to fight the old lizard monster in the final battle and determine who would win this battle. Then the lizard monster looked so angry that he even threatened them by saying it reminded them of when he said that he would let them die without pain, while clasping his hands together and releasing some energy. Then the monster started jumping and saw red and black energy surrounding its body to launch an attack on the two of them. Dylan and Lennox are now preparing to receive the attack. Now the monster is above them and preparing to destroy them both. Lennox then wondered if this was how he died. The attack was very powerful and huge. It even caused quite a loud explosion. Now you can see Lennox's gun and Dylan's gun crashing on the ground. And it turned out that Lennox was still alive and survived the attack by using a barrier. Even he didn't expect that he would still be alive after receiving such a powerful attack from the lizard monster. It turned out that when he saw in front of him, there was a woman who was holding back the attack from the lizard monster. Lennox asked who the woman was, and she had helped him from the terrible attack of the crazy lizard monster. They continued to fight, and now the lizard monster seemed to have run out of patience and said that it seemed like he had been fighting here for too long while continuing to beat the woman in front of Lennox. It turns out that the lizard monster realized that the woman was a hunting dog from the government, namely Evelyn. Evelyn continued to withstand attacks from the crocodile monster. Evelyn then released all the green energy in her body and said to the monster that this time she had crossed her limit, and like preparing to roast the damn crocodile lizard monster. The lizard monster realized that it had stalled for too long as it continued to attack Evelyn. Evelyn then beat the old lizard monster until he flew away, and said that the old man thought he would not be found out after the factory explosion and its contents were silent. Then Evelyn added that she thought Pandemonium would hide for a while and asked the monster what its purpose was to disrupt District 42. Then the lizard monster defended itself and said to Evelyn that she was innocent because it wasn't her who blew up the factory, but the two of them, Dylan and Lennox. Evelyn then looked at the two of them, but she again blamed the monster lizard by saying that it was useless for Croken to brag, those who almost had their heads crushed. How could they be able to destroy this building and everything in it, especially since one of them was wearing an obscene mask? Evelyn didn't believe Croken's words. Then the lizard monster said that it was natural for Evelyn to suspect him of being the perpetrator who destroyed his factory, instead of thinking that the factory exploded because he failed to stop the two of them. Croken added that whether he believed him or not, he wouldn't bother anymore. Then Evelyn asked whether Croken intended to run away. Croken responded that fighting government emissary agents was not part of his contract. Then he left them, saying that he had no reason to do anything detrimental to Evelyn. Lennox realized that the monster was avoiding combat, which meant that Evelyn was stronger than the lizard. Evelyn then asked how the two of them were doing. Dylan then bows and thanks Evelyn for saving them, and they say that they are fine, but replies that they shouldn't thank him because it was his job to save them. Hearing this, he was a little shocked and thought that the woman was a woman he had met before, namely the woman selling vegetables. Then he offered to help Lennox to stand up, but Lennox refused and he tried to stand up himself with a shaking body. Then he said he was so attentive he felt he had seen it before, but maybe he was the wrong person while cleaning his clothes. Thought he already knew that Evelyn was not an ordinary person, but he didn't think Evelyn was a government official, and he also didn't seem to be lying when Evelyn said he made a lot of money. Then when she heard Lennox answer that maybe he had the wrong person, Evelyn said, and looked away, saying that how could it be him, because Lennox's mana pattern was also different from the man she met, even though it was indeed Lennox, and Evelyn said that Lennox's mana was very unique. When they first met, Evelyn, with a scary, distorted face, asked Lennox why a magician seemed to be in a place like this. Then to think that who would have thought that he would use the things he learned during their first meeting in their second meeting, changing his patented mana every time he used magic, turned out to be quite helpful. Then Every said that he wanted to give them a little advice while putting his mask back on. He said if possible, don't deal with Pandemonium if they want to live long. He then released his green energy, then left very quickly and flew very nimbly. They both looked at him as he left. Dylan Lau said that they were lucky. Lennox said that Dylan had to give up many of the gifts he got today. While going back to cleaning his clothes, he thought that none of this would have happened if Dylan had left the factory sooner. After all, it was Lennox who was slacking off against Croken, but he could say that they were lucky. Lennox was a little annoyed. Then he said that because Lennox had saved his life, he would give him all his reward, except for Dylan's 10 million cells. Then Dylan added more, so that Lennox could take it to 40 million cell. Then while Dylan was thinking about what kind of new weapon bag he should buy, Lennox was feeling that even though he got money from Dylan, why did it feel like his money was decreasing? They all got ready to leave. Then Lennox drank the small liquid again and saw that, making Dylan suddenly startled, he wanted to drink the blue liquid again, and then said that it wasn't good if he drank it too often. Dylan added that it wasn't good for him. Then he suggested that he should strengthen his muscles like Dylan. If he had a strong core, he could do anything, but before he finished what he was talking about, Lennox immediately interrupted and said that he wasn't even helping at all. Dylan then got annoyed. What he meant was not helping, even though he had fought as hard as he could tonight. The sun began to appear, and now dawn was breaking in the east. They walked while chattering and returned home after a very long night's fight. 10 days later, Lennox was in the bathroom just finishing washing his face and changing clothes. After he cleaned his body, he then walked towards his bed with his body shaking because of the incredible fight he had when he was fighting the annoying old lizard monster the last few days. Lennox immediately lay down on his bed and thought for a week after the factory incident, because he didn't know if this was due to a mana addict trait or a viper overdose which caused his body to keep shaking, but he fell ill. He slept for 4 full days. He felt that he couldn't go on like this. He must have the strength and will to endure hardship and danger. Then Lennox woke up from his sleep and sat on the edge of his bed, his body shaking very much. He thought that if he wanted to start that, he should start eating properly and healthily, not canned food anymore. He also had to find better medicine. Then, seeing some money on his table, Lennox thought that the first thing he should do was take his wages first. Then Lennox went to his regular bar where the bar owner and bartender greeted him very cheerfully and said that their valuable customer had now come and he had been looking for him and asked where Lennox had been in the last 10 days. Lennox said there was something that needed to be taken care of, and the woman said that was a shame. If Lennox had died, he could have taken the prize for himself. However, Lennox curtly replied, "Keep dreaming." While sitting there, Lennox felt like he was going to die from the side effects of mana addiction. However, there was still no need to reveal his weakness to the woman, so he said what happened to Dylan and what had happened to him during the past 10 days. While the woman was looking for something under her table, she said that Dylan came that same day, and he took out something in the shape of a black suitcase and a blue light. Then he handed it to the child and said that this was a gift from Dylan, and he said he wanted to give 40 million cells to Lennox. The woman then opened it, and sure enough, the suitcase contained a lot of money. Then she said that she had already charged Dylan the transfer fee, so Lennox didn't need to worry. Then the woman also added that she got a bonus from Veritz, where now her total money is 60 million cells, consisting of 61 million notes. Lennox didn't seem to think he'd get that much money, so he then took one. Has the stack of money started? Is this really a 1 million cell note? Then the woman said that they only used the same products that the officials used to convey their sincerity easily. Then he praised their work for doing a good job and completing the task. He said that the woman heard Lennox being killed by the old crocodile monster. Lennox always answered that in fact he would have died if it had not been for Evelyn's intervention. Then Lennox then asked the woman if she had ever heard the name Evelyn. The woman answered that she knew a little but not much. She only knew that Evelyn worked directly for the government as an agent, that's all. Then he added that Lennox could consider him a member of an armed force managed directly by the government with large funds. Lennox asked questions about Evelyn becoming an agent. Then he asked the woman again about pandemonium, then explains that among all the gangs, murderers, and criminals, the group is treated like royalty. They only invite people they like, so not much information about them gets leaked. The people they know are definitely members. Only people like Kroken, whose traces have been known for a long time. Just think of facing them as facing a natural disaster. If someone is unlucky, then he will die. And if someone is lucky like Lennox, then he will survive. It is a way of life in this world. Lennox, who listened to the woman's explanation, then understood, and thought that was why Dylan was so calm, even when he was on the verge of death. Then, while the child was thinking, the woman gave him something again. It turned out that was the information he needed when he asked the woman about making a fake ID card. He then gave the address on a piece of paper and said that he would tell the people so asked, and told Lennox to visit them immediately. Then the woman spoke again in a high tone and seemed angry because until now, Lennox had not registered to get a bank account and buy a cell phone at the same time. Because it was very difficult to prepare that much money, he couldn't even contact her. Hearing this, Lennox then nodded his head, indicating that he understood, but when he put the address in his shirt pocket, he asked the woman if she could ask him for one more favor. In a narrow alley there is a secret door, which is the address Jenna gave Lennox to go to. He then entered the room and met a shaved-headed man who was sitting in front of his computer. When the man looked back, he saw someone behind him, and it was Lennox who said that it was Jenna who told him to come there. But now his appearance is different with his blonde hair and glasses. It looks like he is really serious about creating a new identity. He looks very handsome while holding his 60 million CL suitcase. The bald man then spoke, and apparently he had realized that it was Lennox, the person Jenny had been talking about before. Then he said whether Lennox had heard the rough outline, and asked them to complete the payment first. Then Lennox took out some money from his suitcase, a lot of 1 million CL. The man then took the money and said he was carrying valuables there. He added that notes were made to high-level management who trusted the cash. Even commercial banks could hardly get involved while laughing and kissing the money he earned. He said that he felt Lennox was a quite important customer for Jenny. Then he asked Lennox to wait, because he had to bypass the Balkan resident registration network first. Right then, asked if he changed all the information on the network. The man explained that he would not change all the information on the network. He would only change basic identification such as name, address, age, and photo, but he didn't change the data directly. While fiddling with his computer, he added that he only changed the signal that came out automatically. In essence, he only entered his identity. This identity will work as a normal identity, however. If someone tries to find and monitor the network, it won't be long before Lennox will be found out, and it doesn't seem safe for him. He then added that there was indeed a better way. Lennox has to contact the network administrator so he can change the information directly, but the price is also more expensive, namely around 400 million CL. Hearing this, he swallowed his saliva, and of course he didn't have that much money. In fact, the money is now very far from the nominal 400 million CL. The bald man has managed to get into the network, and now he just has to look for the ID of the missing person. Then he activates it again. After that, he just changed the contents. It seems that now the preparations are complete. Then he told Lennox to take a photo next to him. Then he asked whether Lennox had thought about his new name. Then Lennox said that he wanted to change his name to Evan, and the ending can be anything. Lennox thought that he needed at least one ID that could be used in public, because he also didn't know when to abandon his identity as Van. That was also the reason why he changed his face again, and he also needed to prepare for various situations in order to continue this kind of work. And now the identity change is complete. Van has now got his new identity, and then he walks in the middle of the city. After he came to this world, this was the first time he held proof that he actually lived there. Fake names, addresses, ages, and faces, nothing original. He looked at his new identity card as Van. Even though he had survived and gone from place to place, he managed to live in this place. As he walked, Van thought that today he felt that he had finally been recognized. Apart from that, he had also bought a cell phone and called Jenny and told her that now Jenny could contact him via this number. Jenny said that even though she had told him that he could only contact Jenny when he wanted to work. Maybe Van was the first person in this city who took a month to get a cell phone and finally contact him. Jenny said that he was like a mage who isolated himself in a forest to study there. If he wants to continue his work, he has to find a source of income that he can get during the day, too. Then Van said that what he meant was something like a part-time job. Jenny said that was exactly right, because if an unemployed person's bank account kept receiving money from unknown sources, it would definitely look strange. And if he keeps working, the money he will earn will also increase. So he asks her to start thinking about it. Van thought before he decided that he would continue working with Jenny until he understood more about how this city worked. Then maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to work at the place Jenny recommended. Jenny then added over the phone that rumors about her must have spread widely because of this incident. Who knows, maybe someone will ask him to do the work personally. And in some cases, maybe the payout will be bigger according to the finishing ability, so Jenny asked Van to wait for that. After turning off the phone, Van felt that even Jenny Keeney's attitude had become more friendly. It was good to work with her, but he couldn't continue to trust her. He was sure that he had also learned from Dylan that he could use ice magic. But Jenny still hadn't said anything about it, and they only said what each needed to say. Then Van returns to Jenny's bar to ask for her help again. Van takes the Viper out of his jacket pocket and asks Jenny if she knows where he can buy the Viper. Jimmy says he knows some places, but how does Van use cheap stuff like this? Van wondered how Jenny could say that it was cheap stuff. Then Jenny explained that she would only damage her body with the side effects of the Viper if she continued to use things like that continuously. Then Jenny took another piece of paper and said that she would give him information about a Viper expert who did his business in the 30s district. However, Jenny didn't know whether Van had been to the 30s district or not. While writing the address, Jenny Lalu said that the atmosphere there might be different from here in the 40s district, where there is a place with facilities that require a large space, such as amusement parks, resorts, ports, and industrial buildings are there. Then Jenny told him to go to District 31 and give the address to Van. Realizing that Jenny was just answering his question directly, he didn't ask or say anything beyond his question. Van thought that he couldn't be sure if Jenny was hiding it on purpose or not, and maybe she would stab him in the back one day, or maybe she really wanted to continue working with him by hiding her secret. Van then returned to the city to find a taxi as transportation to get to District 31. He then thought that he couldn't be sure until they revealed all the cards they had, but he also didn't want to just wait. The van then left using a yellow taxi to go to District 31 according to the address given by Jenny. Now Van has reached 31, where he stops at a botanical garden. He thought how there was an expert selling vipers in the botanical garden. Then, because Jenny told him about this place, he would enter as Van. He then entered the place and saw lots of people there visiting the botanical gardens, even as if they were having recreation with their children and families. Van, who was paying attention to the place, felt that this place was like a large forest, while looking at the conditions around him where there were lots of strange and large plants around him. Even plants that looked like monsters were there. While Van was walking along the place, several plants that had light also flew around his body in the wind. He didn't expect that there was a place like this in Balkans, and the place Jenny wrote about seemed to be there. When he looked to his left, he saw an exit that led to the gift shop. Then Van visited the gift shop where he saw lots of items that could be bought there. When he entered the room, he saw a door at the end of the room, and that was the door he was looking for, where the door is like a steel door that says staff only. Van then opened the door and saw that there was a ladder leading down. He then went down the stairs and saw another door with a green light. Then he also smelled an aroma that might be a little different, but it still smelled like Viper, and he felt like he was in the right place. Then Van headed towards the door, and when he opened it, the aroma surged out and wafted over his body. The room looked like a laboratory with several plants placed in glass test cases. Then, when he looked into the room, he saw someone there concocting something. The person realized that there was someone else in the room and asked whose boss he was. Van then came into the room and said that Jenny Yang told him about this place. It turned out to be an old man who said that what Jenny C meant was the boy who sold alcohol in District 49. Then the man said that it was so strange that he never even gave him permission to introduce new customers to him. The man looked quite scary, as he only had one eye while the other eye looked like it had a glowing green stone. The old man looked very cynical and said to Van that he had never given Jenny permission to introduce new customers to him. Hearing this made Van a little surprised, and he asked what he was going to do. But suddenly the old man said that he shouldn't have said that because after all he wasn't so rich that he had to choose his customers. Then the old man smiled with a scary, distorted face, then said that as long as he got money from customers, then it wasn't a problem. He asked Van what he wanted to look for in his orchard. Then, looking around him, it turned out that there were lots of plants that the old man was experimenting with. Van then asked the old man why there was an orchard in the botanical garden. Then the old man took out a plant and asked Van if he knew what plant it was. The plant is like a rose but has layers of red flowers while the roots are shaped like an onion. Then the old man explained that the plant was called Eonium. It has the effect of increasing energy, physical activation, and increasing stamina. He also added that there are lots of ingredients like this in the botanical garden, and asked if it was necessary for him to buy materials like this elsewhere. Hearing this, Van understood, and he took out the viper that was in his jacket pocket, then said to the old man that he was looking for something that had a similar effect to this viper and asked if he had it. Then the old man realized that it was a viper that could be activated with a button, and he tried to see it by opening his viperm and trying it a little. When he felt it, he threw it back and said that it was a very cheap viper. He asked Van why he wanted to look for something this trashy. Even this couldn't strengthen his body. But Van felt all along that it had helped him with mana. Hearing this, the old man was surprised that Van used mana, then said that he didn't look like someone who used physical strength. And Van explained that he was a mage. Then the old man said that if so, then everything seemed strange. Because something like this should help him if he's the type of attacker who uses mana to increase his fighting abilities. And this shouldn't be able to help mana for magic, especially different trash like this. Then he also added that there were rumors that if a high-level mage used the viper, they could get some of its effects. But he didn't know whether it was true or not. And also, he saw that Van was too young to become a high-level mage, so magic took a long time to learn. That's how Van thought that was why the viper was so effective, and he thought it would be a great help if he could get something better than that. They can get some of the effects. Then the old man said that something like this had low efficacy and would only damage the body, and advised Van that he should just buy another one because it has bad side effects. Then the old man threw away the viper Van from before. Then Van said that if so, he wanted to buy one that had fewer side effects even though it was a little expensive. And the old man asked about the budget, or what price limit he wanted. Van offers 2 million sell. The old man looked very happy to see the money on his table, and he told Van to wait a moment. Meanwhile, at the bar, Jenny looked frustrated and exhausted and put her head on the table. Then his colleague said, that is he still thinking the same thing, so complained about Van and asked if he thought he said he didn't notice. Because Van didn't seem bothered or anything like that, his colleague said that he didn't think so because mages were people who were always sensitive, even to small possibilities. Hearing this, Jenny then thought that even Dylan could tell the difference between lightning and ice magic. And if that's the case, that means Van is not an ordinary lightning mage. But the question is, why he is hiding that fact. His colleague asked if he was jealous of Van, but he answered that Van was great, but his personality was also good. Dan asked his colleague if he had ever met a mage as understanding as Van. Her colleague advised Jenny not to be too hasty. All they can do now is offer Van a good job while giving Jenny a cola. Jenny replies that she knows all that. And if that's the case, he'd better offer a job from the company. Then he opened his computer. His partner asked if he would still accept that after the last incident. Hearing this, Jenny was then shocked and thought that she wouldn't even be surprised if Van suddenly went into shock when he saw a crocodile monster after that incident. Then he added that it would be better to offer jobs related to mercenaries and gangs for a while. But Jenny said that gang work was normal, and she would look for mercenary work for Van. And it was felt that Van would not be against this because he had already worked with Dylan, who was a mercenary, and the masonry office would definitely be wide open for a mage. It was a bonus for them to have a mage because it was good for establishing relationships with other groups. Then his colleague said that he was helping his business because Kaiser asked him to, and he didn't know how long he could help her. Crossing his arms, he said that Jenny was sharp and smart, but she was impatient. Jenny, who heard that, just answered okay and continued looking for work for Van. Meanwhile, in the botanical garden, the old man who had finished Van's ordered viper then gave it to him and said that this should be enough. The viper is called Cash Aid C-107, where it is stored in the same place as Van's previous viper, namely a viper with a small tube. The man also explained that it was around 6 hours of physical improvement as well as the activation of mana and stamina. After that, headaches, convulsions, vomiting, and a small possibility of vomiting blood were the slight side effects of the viper item he made. Hearing that, Van said how could he call that a slight side effect? Then the old man said that for an item worth 2 million cells, it was the one that had the fewest side effects. Then Van took one of the vipers and looked at it more clearly. Then the old man added that the side effects could be reduced, but that would make the price more expensive. He also doesn't sell it for less than 10 pieces at a time. Then when Van looked at one of the vipers he bought, he realized it had a different filter. Then the old man explained that it was a new model that used mana and not buttons. Van noticed that it was similar to Calvin's and Cub's products. Suddenly the old man became angry and shouted and said how could he dare compare this with a cheap item? Doesn't he know they make that cheap trash with chemicals alone? Meanwhile, he makes all his products using natural plants. Then Van immediately took all the vipers he had made and left. The old man suddenly smiled and told him to come back later when he needed the viper. Meanwhile, in the Krimgar mercenary group, Dre Krimgar was sitting in his chair and found 2 resignation letters on his desk. He said that he even had difficulty recruiting these 2 mages, but they just walked out. Then someone came and said that they had been told to behave better, Captain. He is Wayan. Dre Krimgar, who was very annoyed, then squeezed the letter and then punched the table in front of him. He even screamed and said that he didn't even make them do anything difficult. All they need to do is survive here for 3 months. He screamed until everyone's ears hurt. Then he added that he would take care of what they needed. Kithel said that their job seemed too difficult for people like them while looking at Ike. Then Dre Krimgar said that he really needed a mage for this mission and asked where they could get one, then asked Kithel if he had one. Kithel turned his head away, looking unable to answer. Then Dre Krimgar's cell phone rang, and it was a call from Jenny. He asked what Jenny needed and why he was calling him after not having had contact with each other for so long. Jenny then called and said that she was calling to ask if she needed a mage. Like the fall of the moon, Dre Krimgar immediately answered loudly that it was true that he needed a mage. In fact, he needed 2 at this time. Then Jenny said that she could only introduce 1 person. Hearing this, Dre Krimgar immediately felt weak, but Jenny said that he didn't need to worry because this person was stronger than 2 ordinary mages, and he could guarantee that. He then added that compared to other mages Dre Krimgar had ever seen, Jenny added that he was different from the others. Meanwhile, Van has got the viper he needs and is now preparing to move on with his life. Today looks very bright as seen at Van's residence. He has bought some healthy food and no longer buys canned food. Sunlight entered Van's bedroom window and illuminated his room and touched his body, which was now sitting cross-legged on the floor near his bed. Van closed his eyes and calmed himself down, and now he was going to start. He took out an engineering barrier. Normally, he would have to create a magic circle and do it in a complicated way, but just by concentrating hard enough, he could put magic into space itself. Van continued to concentrate until his magic technique barrier was formed around the room. Apart from that, he also created magic security on its surface. Now his technical barrier fills his room and residence, and with magic security that locks and protects the place where he is. If someone infiltrates the barrier, they will immediately be struck by 14 lightning bolts at regular intervals. Then he will also add gravity bind to the entrance floor. And now that it was all over, he could only do it like this because he was at the hotel. but he could have prepared better if he had his own house. The first stage of preparation was complete. Then Van stood looking at the window and prepared to make the second preparation. However, when he wanted to start, his cell phone rang. It turned out it was Jenny's call. Jenny apparently asked if Van had any events this afternoon. Van then answered that he didn't have any events this afternoon and it seemed like it was a matter of work. Then Jenny told him to come to the bar, and Van immediately went there. Van thought that all this time he didn't have a cell phone, and it turned out that having a cell phone really helped a lot. He then sat at the table in his room, playing with his cell phone. He could even find out the current situation in the Balkans. This time it was news about the Charlotte Corporation's second production factory in District 42, exploding and causing problems with the release of new products. Residents living within a 2-kilometer radius were advised to evacuate themselves, but there were no reports of damage other than the factory building exploding. The cause of the explosion is thought to be a gas leak. The authorities are currently investigating. It turns out that the news included a factory explosion caused by an attack and fight between Van, Dylan, and an annoying, ugly old crocodile monster. Seeing the news, Van thought that Charlotte really wanted to cover up this incident as an accident. He thought this was how it would be if he collaborated with a company. Then he put his cell phone on the table, and Van again thought that closing the case was really neat, and there were no traces at all, and the pay was also big. He was happy because he didn't have to think about it too much. But what is now on his mind is that there are so many things that are beyond his control and vision. Now, Van has to be more careful when doing work related to business and Kroken. In just 2 months of his work, and he had already encountered a criminal organization called Pandemonium. Even though Lennox's magical abilities are quite great, he is still no match for a monster like him. Van needs more ways to survive in this place than just using magic alone. Giving Nature approaches his bed and sees a package that says, "Gun Barrel." Van reached over and opened the package, then thought that the second preparation was for that. He got a little excited. At the bar, Van meets him there to talk about work. It turns out that the job was a request from the Krimgar mercenary group. They want to take back a building, and they need fire mage support. Then Van said that it was because of the mission that was why the pay was quite big. Then Jenny added that it was usually expensive to hire a mage, and the demand was always more than there were available. Thinking about the mercenary group, Van remembered that Antares mage, Dylan. Then he said to Clear that he seemed interested and would listen to the details. Then Jenny took back her laptop and said that there was a gang called Scavenger. They had taken over the office building that used to be used for photos of the consulting company, and they were now using it as their headquarters. People who previously worked in the office were kicked out without having time to turn off the circuit, because they were afraid that all information might be erased when they were forced to turn it off. Then the consulting company made a request for help to the Krimgar mercenary group, and they accepted it. So in short, the person hired by the consulting company wanted to rent a van. Then Van asked what the fire support mage would do. Jenny then explained that it was a task that wasn't actually that difficult. It just needed to fire magic from behind the mercenaries. Van then thought a little and was silent for a moment, looking at that. Then Jenny said that there was another job if Van didn't want that one. The story about a male mage who managed to survive after facing an old crocodile is quite famous here. Then Jenny said that if Jenny were Van, she would prefer Krimgar's job, because they're very sensitive about money, so they would never cheat Van or do something like that. Hearing this, Van asked if this often happened while drinking his orange ice. Jenny then said that there are a lot of trash people in this world. In fact, there are also groups who cut off their hands and feet after the work is finished. Then Jenny came down from her chair and said that that was why someone as great as herself lived comfortably with guaranteed security and trust at a small cost from clients and freelancers while shaking her hair. Hearing this, IFA smiled and said that he would take the job. Hello Van asks about the time and location where he will help the mercenaries of Krimgar. It turns out the location is in District 53, tomorrow morning at 05:00. Then Jenny said that she would send the exact location to Van's cell phone. The next day at precisely 05:00, 00, they all gathered the Krimgar mercenary team in District 53 to carry out their action and mission. Dre Krimgar then looked at his watch and said below it was time. Then Wayan asked Dre Krimgar what he thought about the new mage they recruited. Dre Krimgar then says that he is a skilled lightning mage. Jenny also said that he insisted on asking for 20 million cells even though he was dead. So he believed it. Kithel also added that if he is a lightning mage, it means he is a good mage because he must have done a lot of magic experiments. Dre Krimgar then said that he didn't know much, but he should be pretty great, even though he didn't know how he would act. Then Ike told the captain that someone was coming. It turned out it was Van, who had just come while eating his sandwich. They all asked how he could come wearing only simple clothes. Then Van approached them and said that he thought he was in the right place now. Van's appearance was truly beyond their expectations, where he looked like a randy child while eating his food, and even had leftover food stuck in his mouth. Kithel immediately looked annoyed and angry because Van's appearance was too simple, besides that he was even rude while eating his food in front of all of them. Kithel says that what is being done now is even before the mission begins. However, Van curtly replied that he was eating and asked if Kithel was blind and didn't see him eating a sandwich, because he had to eat on time for his health, even though the paprika sandwich was not delicious. Seeing Kithel, who was very upset then, Dre Krimgar restrained him and said that they had paid 20 million cell to rent him, and he hoped they wouldn't hurt each other's feelings. Hearing this, Van then said that he would do his best. Then they all gathered and the captain said that because the mage Nga was already here, so they had to do a final briefing. They all prepare to launch the mission. Then Dre Krimgar shows a hologram of the building from his computer, and he will start explaining briefly because they have done this before. He said that their main goal was to take over the power server on the 3rd floor. There are 2 paths leading to the 3rd floor. The elevators and stairs will definitely be guarded by armed troops from Scavenger. However, they are not difficult opponents, but they are also mana users, so they still shouldn't be careless. Then the captain asked Unit 2 to head to the 3rd floor with Weya as the leader, and ordered to thwart those who were blocking the way to the power production facility and check whether the servers were okay. Then Unit 3 will be with the captain and Iki to clean the 1st floor. Meanwhile, Unit 1 with Kithel as head entered through the 2nd floor window, and blocking them from wanting to go up to the 3rd floor. After that, Unit 2 will go down, and then Units 1 and 3 will go up and repeat the same process. When everyone understood, they prepared to carry out the action. Van, who was watching Dre Krimgar, the captain, asked if he was Dre. He even spoke quickly, but his words sounded clear and calm. He was born as a leader. Then the captain informed and ordered Van that he only needed to throw his attack at the start of this mission, then follow Unit 3 and help them from behind, and now it's time for them to start their mission. Everyone was getting ready in their respective positions. The Dre Krimgar mercenary team and Mage Van are now preparing to launch their action to complete their mission. Everyone was ready in their respective positions. Apart from that, they have also prepared their various weapons to attack the enemies. The van was also being prepared. Then he watched Weya, who was arranging her pistols and weapons. Then, Van thought that in a world where we could strengthen the body with mana, the fact that long-range and short-range weapons also existed, it wasn't so strange. Everyone who works in this field knows there are times when miracles such as magic are necessary. Even with the various weapons they have, everyone really needs a mage. The sun began to rise and morning began to appear. Several armed scavengers were guarding several entrances and guarding the building. They were all spread out at several points. Meanwhile, the mercenary team, which is preparing and hiding, consisting of Unit 3, will try to enter, and the captain said to Van that the possibility was slim, but they were also recruiting a mage, so he asked for help to inform immediately if he saw anything. Hearing that, Van said that he would do it. Then Van suddenly felt something where the feeling was a visual thread made from an unknown place, and Van thought that it seemed like someone wanted to find out how many of them there were. But that way he could track the enemy mage's location if he followed the visual thread. Then Van touched the visual thread he felt, and now the yellow visual thread was now filled with his blue energy, and began to spread to the end of the thread. And with this ability, Van now finds Mage from the enemy. And of course, if magic is destroyed during activation, the consequences will go directly to the mage who activated it. Then the enemy mage who had failed in activation created magic, which was caused by a touch of energy from Van, suddenly looked like he was suffocating and blood came out of his mouth, then he died. Several scavenger who were there were shocked to see that their mage had now fallen. Then Van explained to the captain that the enemy mage had just used magic to track them, and he found the mage and attacked him, and this was the right time to attack the enemy. Then several of the scavenger soldiers looked panicked because their mage had fallen, and then they immediately prepared to sort and patrol the surrounding area. The captain, who saw the scavengers' very panicked movements, then ordered the Krimgar team to carry out an attack and enter the location. They all started attacking the scavenger teams guarding them by throwing several smoke bombs which attacked them one by one. Then the scavenger team began to realize that the enemy team was ambushing them. The Dre Krimgar mercenary team now looks out of control, and the scavengers seem to be very panicked by the attack. They are all preparing to fight them. And now Van is protecting them from behind. He said that then it would be better if he tried out the effects of the new viper he had just gotten from the old man at the botanical garden. Van then tried his new viper, and suddenly he gained extraordinary strength. Then he remembered that the captain said that he needed the most powerful fire support mage. Then Van activated the power of chain lightning. Then electricity flows and electrocutes all the scavenger members at the front door. In fact, they all looked charred from the attack. The Krimgar team, who were combing the scavenger members with weapons, looked shocked and couldn't believe that the attack that Van Dillen launched was able to destroy and defeat them all instantly and in just one attack. They continued to shoot and destroy the enemies at the front door until there were none left. The captain then told his team that the enemy formation had been destroyed, and this was the right time to attack. They attacked blindly and mercilessly to clear out the scavenger who was there. Wayan, who was attacking several scavenger members, was then shot by a sniper from above. However, this was thwarted by Kithel, who also shot from below and said how could he dare to shoot their youngest member. Kithel is a skilled sniper. But now, there were more and more of them, and there was no end to coming out of the building to attack the Krimgar team. Even the scavenger members tried to shoot the captain, but Ike and the others blocked their attack by using shields and protecting the captain. If the captain said that what about the Shell 1 method, then they launched a Shell 1 attack by shooting and teaching them all to use a very large and heavy shield until it destroyed the main door and even defeated them all. But it didn't stop there. Now other scavenger members were leaving the building, and even more of them. They continued to attack and defeat the scavenger members. Then the captain noticed someone who looked very big with tied dreadlocks, and felt something was different about him. Then, while he was watching him, the person suddenly disappeared, and he attacked Van very quickly. Then when he approached Van, he said that Van was an enemy mage who was a lightning mage, and threatened him that he would be killed and that the fight would be won by them. Then when the dreadlocked man tried to put his gun into Van, Van just watched, and what would happen? The dreadlocked man quickly and nimbly reached Van and then prepared to attack him using a sharp knife. However, Van just watched and suddenly took out a gun from his robe and shot him brutally until he fell due to Van's shot. And Van thought that it was very satisfying that he managed to survive with 3 access shots where he used aim assist, outburst acceleration, and also shock reinforcement, all done very quickly. Then the captain approached him and asked if he was okay. However, Van said that as seen, he was fine and managed to beat the man and make him lie bleeding and die with just 1 shot. Then he said that he could protect himself, so the captain didn't need to worry about him. Van thought that his own way of shooting was normal, but the speed with which he positioned the gun and pulled the trigger was something that even he himself was not sure he could repeat. Seeing this, Kithel asked whether today's mages know how to shoot using weapons. Wayan was also amazed to see Van's performance so cool. Then the captain said that the mages' grades would definitely rise again. Then Ike gave information that the entrance was now clean, and it was time for them to enter the building. Then the captain ordered Unit 1 to prepare. Unit 1 had entered, and they began their action by climbing the window to the second floor. And when they climbed up the window of the scavenger team after waiting there and being shocked by what they saw then, Kithel pointed his gun at it and said that they would open the way so that Unit 2 could climb up, then attacked everyone in the room. Unit 1 then attacked blindly and shot all the scavenger members on the floor until there were none left. Then Wayan, who was the captain of Unit 2, ordered his team to go up and launch their action. They all got ready and went up to the third floor. Then Unit 3, which was now on the first floor, started to creep in and kill everyone on that floor. The captain very easily killed the scavenger team there. Then Van was seen following him from behind, and there was someone from the scavenger team who tried to grab the gun but looked very helpless, and while Van, who looked very bloodthirsty, then attacked him using electricity released from one hand. Then the captain said that it looked like the first floor was clear, and Ike added that he didn't think anyone had come down anymore. Then the captain informed Kithel that the first floor was clean and asked for a situation report on the second floor. Then we gave a report that they were in a cover position. And it was a little difficult to talk now, but suddenly the sound of gunshots came from Kithel's transmission, and it wasn't long before Kithel announced that the second floor was clean. The captain, who was previously worried and took a deep breath, seemed to calm down because of that information. Then Kithel tells the captain that the last man is like an eel, so they will need some time to kill him. Now Unit 3 and Unit 1 will head to the third floor, and they will immediately complete this mission. On their way to the third floor, they were then confronted again by several scavenger teams who blocked their way to the third floor, yet they very easily killed them all with shot, and shot. He was also assisted by Van, who used lightning to electrocute and channel electricity to the scavenger team until it burned them. Then Kithel, who was already on the third floor, told the captain that the third floor was now clear, and the captain said that apparently this was easier than he thought, and he thought that Van was really very helpful. Before even entering the building, he had defeated 10% of the scavenger troops alone. Vans are really great. Then Kithel approached the captain and reported something. Apparently what he was talking about was what if they recruited Van to be their mage. But the captain looked away and said that they had no money. Then Kithel adds that he just needs to multiply his money from the useless newbies to take Van. Even Van can do the work of 4 people. He also added that work would definitely be easier and faster if there were people like him. And if that happens, they will definitely become more famous, and after that they will get a lot of money. The captain said he wasn't sure anyone else thought so. Kithel continues to persuade the captain to recruit Van. Then the captain said that he had to stop his chatter, and they had to finish and continue this mission until it was finished. Then the captain contacted Wayan and said that the third floor was clear, and they had cleared all the enemies, and they now headed to the rooftop and asked what the situation was like above. However, the captain's cell phone made a noise, and it was heard that Wayan seemed to be having difficulty at the top. Everyone heard that became panicked by what happened by Wayan. The captain immediately went to the rooftop and said that it looked like Unit 2 was in trouble. But Kithel stopped him and said that the captain had to wait a moment. Then Ike said to Van that Brands had to come too. Then Van said, and told them to go first, and then he would follow from behind. They all started going up from the third floor to the rooftop by climbing the stairs. When everything was up, Van turned out to be quite tired from climbing the stairs, and he cursed at his own body for not being able to climb the easy stairs. Now the captain and the other teams had arrived at the rooftop, and they saw Team 2 was injured there. They seemed to be attacked by someone on the roof. However, there was nothing left of the enemy as they had finished off everything below. Wayan now looks very sick, and there is a lot of blood. Then the captain ordered the other team to give regeneration poison to all the injured people. The potion was indeed expensive, but it couldn't be compared to the lives of their comrades. Then the captain gave the regeneration potion to Wayan's wound, and immediately the wound healed, and Wayan was now conscious, and he apologized to the captain. The captain said that he had done everything very well. The van, which had just arrived after passing through the troublesome stairs, was then amazed and asked how everyone from Team 2 had suffered serious injuries like Wayan, but none of them died immediately. This is almost impossible unless they are trained people, but skilled people do this and then just run away. Van thought of something and thought that the person who did this must still be around here. Van kept thinking that it looked like the person was hiding, but what about the wounds? Then the captain ordered Mage Van to guard Wayan. Then he also ordered the others to clean up the injured people first, and the rest to remain alert. Everyone now did as the captain ordered to get up and carry some of the injured people. The captain looked very annoyed because his colleagues who were injured and almost died were attacked by someone who was hiding. And it turned out that someone who was sitting on top of the transmitter from the building said that this was a very interesting sight where he was indeed expecting some guests, but not so soon. The man looked quite scary with long white hair and bright red eyes. The man sat on the transmitter holding his weapon. Then the captain looked at him from below and said that he was a bastard asshole while pointing a gun at him. Then the captain said, how dare he hurt his members, and watched them slowly die in pain. The mysterious man asked the captain if he knew how much money was spent on this plan. Everyone asked questions hearing that. Then the man added that all 3 scavenger branches were together to raise money for this mission. They have to take over the servers that they can connect in the network that regulates the electricity tax 53. And have to pay the dozens of people involved in it. Hearing this made the captain look annoyed and said that they were all crazy because they had plans to take reserve money from the Balkan city government. Then the man said that what the captain said was right, and that was their aim to take spare money from the Balkans. But they don't even have to go far to go to a government building. The district office itself has handled more than hundreds of millions of cells. If they attacked a good power-generating facility to disrupt the power in District 53, then the grid security would definitely be weak, and he asked if it was that bad to use the loopholes created by that rotten development. He spoke so casually that everyone was now pointing their guns at him. The captain then answered that he didn't know, but it was clear that it wasn't something a retired soldier like that man would do. Then the old man added that it had been 3 years since he left the front lines. He thought he looked like a normal person now, but he thought he was wrong. The captain then says that there's no way he's a common criminal when he has that much bloodlust. The man laughed out loud and said that the captain knew more than he should. Then the captain says that he doesn't care about what is morally right or wrong about this. He also said that he didn't care what Scavenger had done or how. This is just business, so think of it that way. The mysterious old man casually said that he didn't start this just to stop here, and it was too early to be stopped by a lowly mercenary like Krimgar. Then the mysterious old man took something out of his pocket. It was shaped like a red ball. The Krimgar mercenary team then launched an attack by shooting at the mysterious old man. The man then jumped from the top of the tower and then ate the red pill ball, and suddenly he was in front of them now. Then suddenly his face changed, and his previously white hair became black. His eyeballs also became black, and his teeth were full of fangs. He was like a bloodthirsty monster ready to pounce and devour them all. Then the Krimgar team fired all their weapons at the monster, but the monster quickly moved and attacked one of them. Jensen was injured, and the attack even penetrated his chest, using only one hand. Then the monster asked them all why he didn't kill everyone who came there first. The monster was very scary, where he took Jensen's heart using his hand, then held it, and continued that it was because to use this power, he needed energy to live. Turns out it was black magic. Van realizes that there are various classes that use similar skills in World 2.0 as well. And seeing how he eats human flesh, it's likely he's something between a vampire or a bloodia. If you look at the similarity of the magic system in World 3.0, there should be a big side effect from that. Van thinks he decided to end it here. The monster is seen eating Jensen's heart with its mouth now covered in blood. Then, after he ate the heart, he said that as he had also eaten, it was not enough. Then there was one of the female teams who prepared to use her gun, but her body shook. It was Delin. Then the monster nimbly then immediately reached for Delin to slash with his knife. However, the attack was thwarted by Ike, who used his shield to block the attack. However, it was unexpected that Ike's very strong shield was even destroyed as a result of the motorbike's knife attack and hit Ike. Then the monster quickly moved from the front to behind Delin and prepared to attack her. He got it. then killed Dellen instantly and took her heart. He even said that this one didn't even taste good. Seeing that both of his teams were dead, their hearts had been torn out by the monster, the captain then ordered his entire team to go forward and attack that damn monster. However, the monster was very easily able to defeat them all, even quickly and nimbly killing them in one move.